Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Climbing Sycamores podcast, where we look at today's topics to get a better view of Christianity. I'm Annie Beege, and I'm joined by my friends Ben Sadler and Matt Harbach.
And we are rolling.
Cool. Hey, I feel like, did we do this last week? When was the last time?
Yeah, we did.
Last week we did.
We snuck
Okay.
it in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was 2
Waiting
weeks
for
ago we
another
didn't.
snowstorm. This is pre-snowstorm, so
Yep.
glad we're getting it in right now.
That's good.
How are you guys doing? How are you doing, Matt? Health-wise, you bouncing back? You're 100%?
I think I fell asleep before 1 a.m. last night,
Okay.
and that is a win. Because whenever I get sick, you just start sleeping so much. And
Yeah.
so I'll sleep from midnight to 10 a.m. And then when you start feeling better, your body doesn't say, oh, it's midnight, it's bedtime. It says, no, you want to wake up at 10 a.m., so you should probably fall asleep around 3.
What is your normal sleep schedule?
Ha, LOL.
Like if all things were normal for you, what would be the most normal sleep schedule?
Probably something like midnight to 7. That would be good.
What are you?
I'm either 9 p.m. or 3 a.m. Okay. There's no in between. It's one or the other. Not
I
really
wake
much in
up
between.
now at 5 a.m. no matter what. If I go to bed at
Wow.
midnight, if I go to bed at 9 p.m., so it's
That's
all about,
is it PTSD from the war
I don't know what it is.
hearing helicopters.
No, just children, I think. Or I really like the morning. I think
do
so. My
too.
body has gotten everything.
I
going
like
that
the
direction.
morning, but I approach it from the other direction. I'm like, let's stay up until sunrise.
and see how.
Yeah.
Oh man,
Because I don't want to miss one moment.
Right.
Annie, what's on your mind?
So I read an article today about how the Pope himself had suggested that people give up trolling for Lent.
Contemporary issues.
Yeah, I don't think he used the word trolling per se because when I read the article, I did a little bit more research because I said, is this really what he said? Did he really? And so what he was saying was, we should give up, internet bullying and making comments.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Matt's over here laughing because the fact that this is something to be given up for Lent, this is your deep passion.
6 weeks, then you can get back to tearing each other a new one up.
Yeah. So just the fact that, modern problems require modern solutions. But,
Wow.
so.
Which is a little different than giving up chocolate, which
Right.
kind of trivializes the whole season of Lent. And
Right.
have you guys ever given up anything for Lent?
No.
I give up the same thing every year: broccoli, Brussels sprouts,
Yes.
asparagus, cauliflower, anything related to those.
Okay.
They
and that
take
family.
they take my mind away from God.
Yes. Right.
Really, they put me in a very unspiritual place.
This is a big debate between Lutherans and Catholics. It's kind of a rule, or I don't know if you'd say rule, but a really deep tradition. The Catholic Church would say, give up these things and give up meat except for on Fridays or things like that. And that's where fish
I would say
Friday,
there the fish fry was born,
the
right?
fish fry was born.
Yeah.
Lutherans typically don't because they see it that as legalistic or work righteous, give up something. But I think some of that, or they trivialize it with giving up chocolate. The practice of some kind of fasting is very ancient, and it is, even Jesus says when you fast. So it's probably not a bad thing if something is getting out of control in your life, like trolling, or, internet use or whatever. But typically it was always food. You fast for a day or two because that is kind of the most common coping mechanism that we run to for, forgetting about things. And so it's probably not a bad thing to do it as long as you don't turn into work righteousness or legalism or show off to everybody how you're doing it. But you should always be giving up sin if it's trolling. Always be giving up sin.
People really, they are brutal
Yeah.
on TikTok and things like that. Sometimes I'm pleasantly surprised. Sometimes I'm more interested in the comments than the content itself.
Yeah.
And I'm pleasantly surprised about how supportive people can be and how But man, there are just other times where I'm like, this is brutal,
Yeah.
even for me to say that. Like, it's rough.
Even
It's
on
harsh.
the Annie scale.
Yeah.
So is that what you guys are going to give up for Lent then, or trolling?
Trolling?
Or yeah, you going to listen? Or?
I enjoy picking fights with old, politically minded, people. No, I don't.
How does
actually do
that? Yeah. So you're that guy. What you're
You're the troll.
you're Matt 568 or something that I see out there that's causing all the
I'm
problems.
Voice of Freedom 1776.
It's interesting the dynamics though that first of all, how one comment, if you're making a post or making a video, I think for the most part it'd be helpful just to turn off the comments if you're not willing to take on, bizarre people's comments. But how one comment from an nameless, faceless stranger can haunt a person, right? Can get in your head.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, like what we're willing to say when we're anonymous that you would never say in person. So those are interesting dynamics. And I think learning to be more spiritually and healthy minded would be, first of all, I don't know this person, so I don't need to trust what they say or take it with it. And then second of all, obviously, hopefully you're spiritually, emotionally healthy enough to not say that. I don't know, people had to leave the ministry because of comments they've made on different posts that they've gone off on, and it's just really sad. So
Well, and I think it can wear on a person also, even if it's just, a small comment, nothing crazy, but like over, when there's so many of them, even though
Yeah.
it's a stranger,
right,
one stranger making one comment is one thing,
right.
50 or
Right.
more strangers saying, that can, I think, wear on a person.
It's hard for me to think of something that would be more of a waste of time than that. Making comments and following this post over and over again, like move on and go do
Yeah.
something
So
that
what is
matters.
it? Are people just bored?
I think so.
They're bored. They're lonely. They're online. They're
And to be angry gives you a lot of fuel. Like if you have an enemy and you get really angry about something like that, it can be very powerfully motivating, not helpful or healthy, but it can be very motivating.
I think generations see it differently. I really do feel like older generations aren't just trying to like stir the pot, but I feel like they're actually trying to. They see this as a way to communicate
Yes.
and voice their opinion.
Yes.
And they're not always just trying to make a big fuss about things, and but
some people are.
that's
so
they're
what do you
literally-
think the younger generations are doing? Why are they doing?
Well, I think when like all this came out, like this was a legitimate thing. I think the rest, like the younger people, like we look at it and we like, oh, Facebook, that's for like millennials, there's been so many instances of baby boomers making their opinions known, and it's just like we were just like that's the crazy old person from down the street. Like, it's not cool. It's not cool to do that. And I think most young people aren't really the ones that are.
You don't think so?
It's
So you're going to blame the boomers? That's all the boomer fault?
No,
Is that what you're going to
it's-
say? Because
there's-
the boomers
there's-
are going to blame the young people.
yeah. Well, there's two sides, because young people are also notorious for, like, once they get into high school, college, they pick up a stupid cause because they heard like one professor's take on it, or they watched some videos on it, and they
Right.
go 100% all out, and then you get those people too. And
Right.
So
I don't know if it's a generational thing.
yeah, I don't know. There's maybe not. It's just stupid people. It's just dumb people making problems.
I think, though, you can get in, any generation can get in a silo where you're not willing to listen to another perspective or have any kind of empathy. You're on a crusade, and it's really easy to demonize the other side without hearing. So and maybe for different reasons. Maybe some generations don't realize how much we everything's filtered to us. All the fake news that continues to be filtered to us so that we would stay in the loop. And then, I think what you're saying too, that maybe a younger generation doesn't understand that this is one isolated maybe professor or person who maybe hasn't tested some of these ideas in the real world, and and so you get on a crusade on. But in both cases, I think a lot of that goes away when you look at history and you listen to other people's perspective.
Yeah.
It's really hard to be angry with somebody once you know them,
Mm-hmm.
and it's really hard to think you have all the wisdom after you look at a little bit of history, realizing, oh, all right, this
Yeah.
has come up before, and this sometimes works and doesn't always work.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
I to be fair, I feel like there was a brief period in college where I plugged into the politics and the issues of the day,
Yeah.
and then like a year or two later, I'm just like, this is a huge waste of time. It's just making me upset. Like I keep
Right.
watching videos and watching this news and whatever, and it's just making me angry. So why?
And that's when you turn to the attitude of, it doesn't affect me, so I don't care.
Yes.
I
yes.
know.
I'm just like, all right, I'm not going to watch the news. I'm not going to pay attention to any of this crap because like that has nothing to do with my life. I'm getting upset about people I've never met.
Sure.
And it's like, what is the point?
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a cultural value that is generational too, because I think maybe previous generations had a sense of duty and calling and commitment to institutions and parties and things like that. And I think, younger generations are more disillusioned and confused. Like, all right, who do I listen to? Does this actually make anything better?
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if there's got to be somewhere in the middle where we see there is some reason to have an institution, to have a gathering of people that can, speak up for what's good and right, and yet to not be so tied to an institution that we're not willing to call out our institutions when they fail us or
I think it's just too big.
too big.
Like the government, like all that is,
Yeah.
it's like, I want a higher minimum wage because that'll affect me. And no one, okay, well, if we give you a higher minimum wage, then maybe we also have to raise taxes or maybe things are going to get more. Well, I don't want that. Just from the money pot, give me more money
Yeah.
and give them, they deserve more money. Everyone should just get more money, but like you don't, there's no give and take because in my life, there's no give and take. I just think I want a higher minimum wage, for example. And so why don't we just do that? Because it would make my life easier. And there's no sacrifice for me because I'm like, well, obviously I also need healthcare and I need good roads and I want a police force and all this. And it's like,
Right.
People often just vote for, and I get it, but they vote for, things that impact them,
Right.
so whatever that may be. So instead of maybe looking at the bigger picture and what's best for society, and do we really know that?
it's just too big.
It's
You
too
can't
big.
care about everything. Not
Yeah.
everything affects you.
Yeah.
And I guess that's why I was kind of pushing back when you said, this is the boomers problem, whatever, because I think there's so many good examples of the sacrifices they were willing to make for institutions, for our country, that many young people, we've become so individualistic, we don't even think about any greater purpose that we're willing to make sacrifices for. Now, maybe that extreme is, somebody who feels very threatened because they made all these sacrifices in a previous generation and now they're lashing out on the internet or whatever because things are changing. But man, we have to find a way to teach people to sacrifice for something greater than themselves. I think that's one reason why there's so many people feel lack of purpose and feel aimless is because they don't know.
And
They
hop
have these
on the
little
political
causes
train.
that they get excited about and get
Yeah.
angry about it, but it's not to the point of willing to make actual sacrifices that will make a long-term good. So, yeah. All right. Well, that went in a lot of different directions.
Yeah, that's okay.
So for Lent, just don't do it. When you're about to type, when you're about to click, just don't.
Just
and
don't
then and then when Lent ends and Easter happens, then
let them have it.
Yeah.
No.
I was saying no, and then still
a new one.
still keep yourself in check. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good.
All right, what you got, Ben?
Well, we're putting together a sermon series on doubt. And I think this is going to be really powerful and important. Sometimes here at Victory or just even as a pastor, we think, how can we help unchurched people? And so what do they care about? But really, doubt is something that we have to be honest, like the strongest Christians are going to have to face. because we're all going to go through this kind of faith crisis at some time where reality doesn't seem to match up with our theology. And so, yeah, I guess I'd be interested to hear, what do you guys think? Why is it important that we talk about doubt? When is that a good thing? When can it go overboard, maybe, when we talk too much about doubt? Yeah, so what do you think? Is it important we talk about doubt as a church?
Yes.
Why is that?
Because I think it's important for Christians to understand that, like, just because you have doubt doesn't mean that you can't be Christian.
Okay. Yeah,
right?
that's really
so,
important.
I don't know. I think it's important.
Yeah.
I think it's important to let people have doubts, to let people come with questions.
Mm-hmm.
I think anything that is important, and it's important because it's relevant, as
Yeah.
Annie just said, is worth talking about.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you should never to the same point. I mean, there's some issues that church doesn't like talking about, like, you know, I think the Lutheran Church has historically not liked talking about homosexuality very openly. Basically, anything Sixth Commandment related, we like to shy away from. But it's like, is it important? Is it important because it's relevant? Well, yes, it's relevant because guess what? Everyone in your church is a human. So that sort of applies to them. Therefore, it's important, and therefore it should be talked about.
Yeah. Very good. I was thinking it's important because people need a space to struggle. And if we give the impression that once you become a Christian, you have it all figured out, or that the prerequisite for taking the Lord's Supper or participating in worship is that you have no concerns or questions. I've been working with an older gentleman in his 80s who's so tentative to make that next step. Now, thankfully, he has, and he's going to be communing at another church, and I've been working with him for a long time, but he was so convinced, and I don't know where he got this idea, that he had to be so sure about every single thing without any doubts before he ever would. And I said, you know, the Lord's Supper is actually for those people who are kind of still, you still would want to declare yourself a Christian and still say you're a believer, but this is where you get sustained. This is where you refocus, and there is room for those questions. And then every young person is going to go through that as well, especially. You're going to, if you're not doubting now, you're going to have your season. And if we make it black and white, that either you're a believer with no questions or you're an unbeliever who's doubting, we're just setting up people for failure. And I think once somebody has that. Now, I've also heard that we all need to go through kind of almost a deconstruction mode. Like when you're a little kid, you get this idealistic view of the Bible stories, and then you actually start reading the Bible. You're like, oh, there's more to this story than what I was told in the Bible stories.
Scandalous parts.
Yeah, there's some scandals here, and there's some confusing things here, and there's some massacres here, and there's some, you know, all sorts of things that really challenge me, and I'll need to rediscover those. And if we don't let them know that that's coming, I think people will be shocked. So I'm excited about this sermon series. I hopefully more people with doubts are able to come into the church and process those. And the more I've talked to people, the more I've realized it's not that people don't believe in God. They're just mad at him, or they're just frustrated or confused or doubting. And those are two different things. Like yeah, but why did God take that? Oh, so you believe in God. You just took your child or cancer. You prayed about something they didn't answer. So let people process. And then I said this, was that last week when I preached on the Psalms? Like the Psalms are filled with doubt and laments, especially at the beginning. And if you just keep praying, eventually your doubts will turn to faith. And the Bible itself lets us verbalize those. So, yeah, I'm excited about it. I don't know, is there anything else you guys want to talk about when it comes to doubt?
I think I have doubts all the time.
Okay.
Because sometimes I'm just like, what if all of it is just not the case?
Right.
Like we're trying out here, we're working at church, we're trying to get more people in. It's like, what if it is not true?
Right.
It's crossed my mind.
Yeah. And I think for me, that doesn't stick too much because there's no relief in that whatsoever. I think for people that have gone through a lot of pain, people who are trying to escape from God, who are angry at God, they say, well, at least if I don't have to face this if it's just not true. And so there's some short-term relief. For me, there's nothing good on the other side of that. It's not like, oh, maybe it's not true, and therefore I can do what?
Yeah.
I mean, people like to say like, oh, Christians don't like to have any fun. It's like what? Get addicted to substances because you're partying too much, you're sleeping around, like you're not obeying the law, so you're going to jail. What? It's not fun. It's just dangerous.
Dawkins, he put an ad on a bus that said, "There's probably no God, so relax," or something like that, or don't worry about it, or it was like some positive thing because there's probably no God. I was like, is that really like if there's probably no God, like freak out, you're all by yourself, you got no hope, and that's interesting that you said that you have those thoughts. I think I maybe have said it before, maybe on this podcast. We have a group that actually we still meet with, but a group of seminary friends that when we were in seminary, 2 guys were living in the dorms, they weren't married yet, so we'd always congregate in their room after chapel and have coffee and talk about the things on our mind. And one day, one of our classmates, and we're into our second year, maybe this was senior year, so we're already like 8 years into schooling. And he says, "What if we're all wrong? Like, like what if we put in 8 years of school? We're gonna leave our family and friends, get sent to this faraway place, and be pastors and try to convince a bunch of people to come into our churches and believe all this stuff. And what if this is all a tragic waste of time at best?" And then one of our friends, he's really insightful, he said, "Yeah, I've thought about that. But every time I think about that, I do 2 things. First of all, I look around at creation and say, there's no way all these things could have happened by accident. There's too much design, there's too much intention, there's too much purpose in the world. Too many things have to come together to make life happen. So I know there has to be a creator." And then I ask myself the second question is, well, which God is the right God? And only Christianity has 100% of the prophecies have come true in Jesus Christ. Hundreds of them that all came true in the forgiving, loving God of Jesus Christ. And then after I ask those 2 questions, answer them, I'm kind of back to baseline. I'm all right, So I thought that was helpful. Like those 2 questions: was this world created or not? Is this really all chance? Is there any purpose behind it? And then which purpose is the right one? Which God is the right one? And that I tell that to our young people all the time here. Tell that story. So I don't know. Does that help?
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess I kind of subconsciously ask those kind of questions too. But, and then I think just like, okay, so like, what if there is no God? Like, are you going to change your life?
Right.
It's like God has given you so many good things, and maybe you don't believe in him, but it's like, if doing his will, like serving people is what we're meant to do, it gives you a sense of purpose. It gives you a sense of fulfillment. You're now living in a community where people forgive each other and don't hold things against each other.
Yeah.
Like, even if it's not true, it's just so stable. It's so strong. It's so healthy.
Yeah.
It's like, why would you want to, what are you going to give that up for?
Yeah.
Like, oh, thank goodness there's no God. Now I can go, sleep around? Like, oh, that's going to make me happy like it does with everyone else.
Right.
Right.
And I think secular people there's secular societies that are trying to live, outward moral life, live by the golden rule. It's just, there's no objective forgiveness there. And I think that's really what makes Christianity unique, is that you have a resource for objective forgiveness when you can't live up to that golden rule, so.
But I think what's unfortunate is that it seems like, anecdotally, in my experience, people that I'm connected to and know and whatnot, they feel that God is very punitive. Like they're getting more of the law side of things, or they were raised in such a way where I think they really don't understand the gospel.
Sure, exactly.
Piece of it.
100%. I mean, I was going to say, I mean, I used to know people, and I think I used to work with some people, and they would be like, oh, don't swear around Matt. Don't say bad words. Don't talk about that.
If they only knew.
Oh, tell me about it. And it'd be like, oh, are you going to get me in trouble? Am I going to go to hell for saying this? And that's because if you're not Christian, that's all you know.
That's all you know.
Is the law, because it is written on your heart, and it is present in literally every other social structure on the planet. Everyone has law. Nobody else has gospel. It is all you know.
Yeah.
And so you look at Christians, you're like, oh, they have rules, and their rules are harder than my rules. But there's no other way to live. There's no other way for people's brains to even process information, because their gospel is entirely counterintuitive to human beings.
Yeah. Yeah.
I just wish people knew that,
Right,
the gospel side.
That's why it's called good news.
Yeah.
It's a message. We're not just giving good advice or giving good news, and it is really good news. Yeah, I wonder. I think we have to say it in surprising ways, or we have to reveal it in surprising ways, because just saying Jesus died on the cross for your sins, I don't think makes sense,
It's
or
become cliche. Almost.
yeah. But I think we can demonstrate it of forgiving somebody and actually not holding it against them and living the gospel. I think that can be helpful. But but keep finding ways to bring out the uniqueness of what God is actually offering. Yeah. The irony is, as we've lost the gospel in society, we continue to, I think our highest value right now is justice. There's so much social justice, so much
and judgment,
and and our highest value used to be tolerance in society, and we're tolerant. Now it's we're going to cancel you, we're going to make you pay. And so I really do think the gospel can stand out as a bright light. So, yeah. All right, that's all I have to say about that. You were going to talk on something, Matt.
Yes.
Let's hear it.
A subject on which you are both well versed.
Okay, let's hear it. Let's hear it.
So, I want to talk about drug use and what maybe the Bible says about it.
Yeah.
And so to start out, I mean, I think most of us would agree, like things like cocaine and heroin and methamphetamines, these are things to not do. These are incredibly dangerous.
You're right.
Right.
However, as a culture, we have said things like alcohol and tobacco and caffeine, these are all totally fine.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least be 18 years old.
Sure.
And then marijuana is the one that
Yes.
is on the fence that will probably become legal in a few years.
Sure.
Totally across the country.
Yeah.
And I was kind of thinking about, like, obviously the Bible doesn't call out a lot of drugs by name. It says things about, like, don't drink too much, because they did have alcohol, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't call out a lot of drug use. It doesn't give us a lot of specific examples. It says things like your body is not your own.
Mm-hmm.
It says things like your body is a temple.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just wanted to get your thoughts on, like, should that affect how we vote when these things inevitably come to a vote?
Mm-hmm.
Should we use them? Should we not use them? What's the deal?
I think the hard part is they all work at some level. And mostly what we're trying to do with them is alter our state because it's too hard. And I think one of the things that I'm fascinated with counseling and helping people at an emotional level is how can we get to the root so that you don't have to use whatever that is, whether that's gaming, whether that's alcohol, whether that's drug, whatever it is, so that you have to have an altered state. Because I think there's a really different thing of, I'm going out with my friends, we're having a party, let's have a really good glass of bourbon or wine or whatever, and it's to add to the moment or enjoy the moment versus escaping. And I think, my go-to escape, I think, is food, like when I don't want to feel something. And so what is it behind that you're trying to escape? And the problem with drugs is they're so powerful to change your baseline. And I was going to reference this book I read a few years ago called Never Enough by Judith Gressel. Never Enough, a neuroscientist. The Neuroscience and Experience of Addiction. It was a fascinating book about when you start doing drugs, your body is always trying to get back to homeostasis. So it will change homeostasis. So now it's very quickly you become, what people call dependent on that just to get back to normal. And so no longer do you have that escape. Now all you have is a new enslavement to something you have to have just to get out of bed, just to live your life. And so that's my concern, is that once we try to escape, then we become enslaved. And I don't want to be enslaved to anything. And so how can we help people who maybe are dealing with trauma, maybe dealing with unwanted guilt or fear or sadness or whatever? These emotions are so powerful that they've escaped, and now they have a new baseline. And so it's a complicated thing. Because I think that's the real issue. And now you're enslaved, and now you can't function because you're going to start hiding, you're going to start lying, you're going to start excusing because your body is craving this. And like her book says, the book is entitled Never Enough. And because she said when she was doing cocaine, she came to this conclusion: there's never going to be enough cocaine. There's never going to be enough to actually satisfy what my desires are. And that's what addiction is where you're wanting more and more of this thing, and it's not actually delivering anymore, but you can't stop. I think there's, and 4 C's that make up addictions, like compulsion. You feel compulsed to do it. You have a craving. I'm going to look those up. Keep talking. There's 4 C's.
So are you just talking about, sometimes we look at drug use, whatever capacity that is, as defined good or bad or okay based on its legal status, right? Mm-hmm. So is that, your point is, basically there's some legal drugs and then there's some not. Mm-hmm. And we consider the legal ones to be less dangerous?
Yeah. Well, so, and I'm glad you brought up addiction. I wasn't really getting necessarily at people who have deep trauma and are escaping, even though, in that case, bring up sugar, that's a drug in that case too, right?
It's here are the 4 C's of addiction. Yeah. You're addicted if you have this compulsion to do it. You're compulsed to it. You're craving it outside of your when you're not doing it, you're thinking about, you're craving it. You keep doing it despite the consequences. You could lose money, you could lose your family, you could lose your job. You keep doing it no matter what. And it has this control over you. So compulsion, craving, consequences, and control. And if you have those, that's an addiction. So it could be, sugar, it could be any of these things. Yeah. But then, you're asking, could you ever do this in a God-pleasing way? Is that what you're asking?
Well, I'm asking, like, we kind of agree there's a whole bunch of stuff. Being addicted to any hardcore drug, that's a terrible thing. What about people who drink 5 cups of coffee a day? Mm-hmm. Is that something where you would, is that okay? You just say, hey, I'm busy. I don't get enough sleep. I'm busy. I need to drink all this coffee. Mm-hmm. Is that treating your body like a temple, or is that you're a caffeine addict? Mm-hmm. You need help.
Well, the context of your body as a temple comes from 1 Corinthians chapter 6, and that's in the context of prostitution and sexual morality. So I don't know if that's always the best verse to talk about, how you, what you eat and what I think that's a verse, 1 Corinthians 10. That's a little more about idolatry, eating food that was sacrificed to an idol. But it says, whether you eat or drink, whatever you do it all to the glory of God. And then in the book of Romans, it says, if it's not done in faith, it is sin. And so my litmus test is can I do this praising God? Can I have friends over and enjoy a cigar and a glass of bourbon to the glory of God? If I can't, then I shouldn't be doing it. Mm-hmm. It should add to my worship. It add to my joy. It should be something that's fun and enjoyable, but
gift from God.
Yeah, something I wouldn't want hide from my children. If my children found out I was doing it, I wouldn't be embarrassed. So that's a big thing. And then I think there's also with some of these other less maybe these drugs that aren't necessarily inhibiting our life, like all this coffee or whatever, it's then I think the question is like, is this actually wise or unwise? Like, is this
Yeah.
really helping me? You start getting on that hamster wheel and like your sleep is off.
I know.
As somebody who drinks, have you drank Bang? That one looks like a heart attack waiting to happen. that
Yes,
energy
I've
drink.
had it before.
Oh my
It's good stuff.
Ew.
It'll make your whole body kind of like jitter, like twitch a little bit. It's good stuff.
So I think if you're using it as an escape, that's not wise. And you have to be careful on that. And that I don't know if you can say you're doing it to the glory of God. You need to get the help you can get to be able to deal with those really hard, unwanted emotions. So that would be my litmus test. Can you do it to the glory of God? Now, it's funny when you talk about caffeine, like every church function, we just load up with coffee. Like it's like the third sacrament.
Yeah.
And we don't seem to. But if you're a Mormon, you can't drink a cup of coffee.
Yeah.
I remember speaking to a guy who said, he was telling me about his faith, and I thought he was a Christian the whole time. And then by the end of it, he told me he's a Mormon. He's like, I grew up in the Christian church, and I didn't really like coffee anyway. So I thought, what the heck, just be a Mormon. And and it was such a bizarre conversation. Now, I started talking about like sin and need for a savior, and then he kind of switched and got weird on me and got real angry. But once you start laying down those rules, that's what the Mormon Church has said, that it is wrong to have a cigarette or a glass or a cup of coffee. So
Yeah.
and then you start realizing how much caffeine is in so many natural substances, like
Yeah.
any kind of tea or chocolate. It's this natural thing.
Yeah, I think part of the problem is that like there's just some things that we've sort of had to define as like this is food, this is a drug.
Right.
And then that automatically separates them. And like I said, I mean, I've heard plenty of people compare sugar to a drug.
Right.
You can get addicted to that. It can give you a little burst of energy, whatever it is. Like, yeah, I mean, that could be a drug. And it's like, where do you draw the line between things? Who knows?
I think it is interesting when we alter things to really soup them up, how just when it comes to food, altering food as much as we do, so it has these potent taste and flavors, whether it's
And they look pretty.
make it pretty, the dyes and the sugars and the whatever, till it's not a food product anymore. Like we can't stop. Like that's when it really becomes addictive, right? When we have anything like caffeine or even sugar in some of its natural states in the fruits and the things like that, it's interesting how it's really hard, I think, to get addicted to watermelon, right? But it's still, you can still enjoy it. So I don't know where I'm going with that, but it's when we start altering things, they just seem becoming more addictive.
Sure.
So God gave us these things. So once you start saying you can't have this, it's like, well, it is part of creation. In all cases, you can have this. It's never okay. I just wonder when we soup it up, we don't always think about the consequences of that.
Yeah, I was thinking, through this is, we want to take care of our bodies, right? Like we want to eat healthy and exercise. But I also, I do think about the food industry, and I think about, the way that our food is, being pumped full of hormones to make it, bigger and more robust and whatever. And so that is alarming to me too, like the consumption of those foods that are altered so heavily. So I think, we do the best we can to hopefully we do the best we can to take care of our bodies and whatnot. But that, the food does concern me a little bit. So, I mean, in the sense of talking about our bodies, as its temples, or whatever, but.
Well, and Ben says that's not applicable here, actually.
No,
so
I know. I was air
ignore
quoting.
that.
I was air quoting. Nobody could see it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess the reason I just watch on that verse, because like I think there is a whole different level of what happens to our bodies and our hearts when there's sexual sin, things have been done, either things that we've done or things that have done against us, and what the ramifications of that. The the Bible says sex is when the two become one, and what that does in a marriage, it is worship. Our two temples coming together, but outside of marriage, it's destructive to God's design. But then, there is an application. Can I do this again to the glory of God? Can this be worship? And if it's not worship, then I need to think about it. But we just have so many ways now to distract ourselves and to cope with life. And I don't think I want to just run to this is sin because you're overeating. This is sin because you're drinking. This is sin. I know a guy who the only way he could get over his PTSD from Iraq was to smoke pot.
Mm-hmm.
And I was not going to jump down his throat because I'd probably be doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
But, all right, so how can we find the help in you? Because this is not sustainable. This is not something you'd be proud of. And some of you, I tell your kids that you do. And you had a little daughter. So how can we get you the help you need? And that's the thing that I'm fascinated with. Like, what is the underlying issue, these strong, powerful emotions that are overtaking your body so you can't cope with them?
Well, and what about drugs to the relief of pain, whether that's Advil or whether that's marijuana?
Sure.
I think that I would more so advocate for marijuana over like an oxy pill, or like, or same with, the guy with PTSD. I would probably advocate more if this is, help first, of course, but, I would rather the marijuana than, Percocet or whatever. Personally.
Right. And I think the more powerful the drug, then you have a new baseline, right? And that's when it becomes overwhelming. And so, this is probably way outside my qualifications or opinion, there's just too many people I know who've also got addicted to those pills. I know a friend of mine in high school, he was a great football player, just had some injuries. They started giving him some of these things and he could not stop. And it's not your fault. It's not your fault when that happens. Your body has got a new normal and it's craving that, and you just need some help. So I think compassion, but I would think the goal is to not use any of this stuff.
Right.
To not have drugs alter your state because you can't live in the world without it.
Okay, well, but then let's look at pain, right? And so I think, how do we? I don't think we can eliminate pain relief.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
Sure.
Like, because Ben, you said you don't want to be in a position where you're escaping from things,
right?
Right.
But
what
you're
about
escaping
your
pain.
Right.
It's just maybe it's emotional.
Right. Yep. And so we were getting a snowstorm.
Yeah.
I could tell because I had a huge migraine today, so I took an Excedrin. So let me just be honest about that one. Druggy. That's the one that works, and and it's always when a front like this comes in, I'll get a migraine.
Interesting.
So maybe does pot help with that? Should I start smoking
I
pot?
don't know.
Okay, all right.
Probably not. Not until it's legal. Maybe.
Okay.
But
to all the listeners who are part of our congregation, I do not smoke pot. That's really. I would just, as far as you can, I would think I would love to get to the point where I could figure out what I could do. Is there a natural way, a non-drug way for me to get through a storm coming without that? That would be a desire.
Well, and I think that speaks, I think, to like in our kind of our medical community, I think, and I don't know the logistics of it, but, over prescribing
all the time.
Where there's extra, instead of, say you have a surgery and you're going to be in a lot of pain for a couple days, here's a couple of these high, octane like pills to get you through the hump. And then, but instead I feel like there's a lot of over prescribing and it's just there for people to continue using.
And there's always a side effect. I really get nervous about taking it because I know it's damaging my liver. It's damaging when you take an Excedrin. And that's the problem with drugs is 100% of drugs have a side effect. They're doing something to your body. There's never there's not one that doesn't have one. So, yeah, are there ways for us to naturally live in the world that God created as far as we can without altering states? I think that would be the goal for me, at least. Yeah. So it's more of a wise thing versus, and when I need these things, I would think that would be a warning sign, like what is the underlying reason? Can I get to the cause of why I need this?
Mm-hmm.
And can I root that cause out? And I would not, I'm more careful now that I've worked with people for a longer period of time to quickly judge why they're doing it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I don't know the kind of stuff that their demons are dealing with. I know I don't want them to live in, especially if it's destroying their life.
Mm-hmm.
Like if this drug is keeping them, that whole, you're doing it no matter the consequences, and the consequences are hurting your family and your social life, your finances, all that. Then I would want to, let's get to the cause.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Do we solve the problem, Matt?
Did we address?
We addressed it. Yeah, I don't know if we solved anything, but
I think once marijuana becomes legal in Wisconsin, I don't know as a pastor how I will respond to that, because you have Jesus turning water into wine, and so I can say, hey, can you do this to the glory of God? Well, Jesus did.
mm-hmm.
Can you make that exact same connection with marijuana? Some people have. Send me an article that explains how we can do this to the glory of God. Tell me, because I struggle to see how this isn't just an escape that or something that we can always be proud of.
There has been an argument made. So Native American cultures would sometimes do peyote to as part of religious.
Is that
ritual.
What is that?
It's like a little flower and you dry it,
Is it
you
a
smoke
hallucinogen?
it or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, there's been an argument made that, when you do some of these mind-altering drugs, that you have like a spiritual connection with God, like your brain has entered a whole nother state of being, and maybe God gave us these for that reason.
To untap some of our brain that we're not using.
Use 100% of your brain.
That is the confusing part, right? Why did God design it?
Claim to have these spiritual
Right.
experiences.
Why did God put the shroom in the soil?
Yeah.
What? Show me the evolutionary reason for that. Show me the biblical reason for that. Show me, what?
And
what is this?
how much it's flourished, because
Yeah.
like who decided back in the day I'm going to eat this mushroom and how as a result of one person probably right eating a mushroom, how it's flourished, and everybody on planet Earth now can tell you what a shroom is, like whatever, like it's crazy.
Well, I mean, I think these things are like defense mechanisms from animals. So it's like animals are going to be like, oh, don't eat that. But for humans, it's not potent enough to like kill us. It just takes your brain on a wild ride.
Yeah, I've listened to a couple different podcasts on people with severe PTSD, and they swear by taking these one shows you all your sin, all your problems, and you have to face it all because you're not willing to face it all. And then one shows you how much you're loved, and you do a 2-day retreat. And
The law and gospel.
yeah,
of drugs,
the law and
right?
gospel through shrooms, right? I was like, oh my goodness. So I don't know. Somebody's got to tell me why these things are in the world. I have no idea. Yeah.
I'm just here to ask more questions.
All right. Well, we'll see if our subscriber list goes up or down after this one. Yeah. All right.
We good?
I'm good.
Don't do drugs. Stay in school. Wash behind your ears. You know the drill.
Just say no.
If you'd like to get a hold of us here at the Climbing Sycamores podcast, feel free to email bsadler@victoryofthelamb.com. BSADLER@victoryofthelamb.com. If you like today's intro music, it's been brought to you by Andrew Lynch's song, My Name, Hello.